Pipebomb Radio.
What?
With your hosts, Felix Olmedo and Austin James.
This voice, this is power. In anybody else's hands, this is a microphone. In my hands, it's a pipe bomb. It's showtime! Woo!
Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of Pipebomb Radio. I guess it comes on every Tuesday, so I shouldn't say that. But nonetheless, hope everybody's enjoying their week. Tonight, we have a very special guest joining us. A man definitely I watched for many years on television, and definitely one who I have great respect for, the one and only Scott Hudson. He will be joining us tonight. How you doing, Austin?
Phenomenal. And you know what's cool about Scott Hudson? I think he's actually the first commentator that we've actually had on Pipebomb Radio thus far. That's actually been in both WCW, NWA, not NWA, WWE, and, well, I guess you can say NWA because NWA is affiliated
WCW,
with
WWE, and TNA Wrestling.
In NWA.
Well, it was called NWA TNA back then.
So we can get technical, and we can say that NWA.
Well, we'll let him decide that. How about that? And speaking of which, I believe Mr. Hudson is calling in now, so we will go ahead and bring him on and have a chat. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm thrilled that you guys didn't say you listened when you were kids. So
you know,
far,
I was going to say that, but you know what?
Air.
I wasn't a kid. I was a teenager, so.
Close enough. It reminds me of how old I am and how close I am to death. You know, actually, you know, to be honest with you, in 1998, let's see, that was, that's when you joined WCW, is that right? 1996, January 96.
Okay. Now, I'm curious now, how did you get your start in as far as becoming a commentator in pro wrestling, and what kind of got you interested in wanting to do something like that?
Well, to make me feel even older, and I appreciate that question right out of the chute, that's fantastic, is that in the 1980s, when I graduated high school in 1982, I, working my way through college, like you guys did probably, 5 years ago, I worked my way through college as a disc jockey, playing country music, playing top 40, playing adult contemporary back in the early to mid 1980s in my hometown down in South Georgia, and the program director there, the owner, who was the same person, hey, we want to start doing high school football. Do you know anything about football? And I played football and in high school and college. I said, sure, why not? Yeah, I'll give it a shot. And that's how I got my start in broadcasting, was doing radio, spinning records, 45s, discs, and then calling high school football on the radio in South Georgia. And as I worked my way up through that and moved to the city of Atlanta, I had done high school and college football and basketball and baseball on the air. And when I moved to Atlanta, I've been a mark for wrestling since like 1970, since I was 5 years old, and met up with a guy named Steve Prazak, who is still my best friend, second to my wife, who is my best friend of all time. Steve's my second best friend, and as we would go to independent shows around Atlanta. We went to a show one night. If you guys got 30 seconds for the story, I'll tell you. We went to a show in Carrollton, Georgia, and the ring announcer was atrocious, and I'm thrilled to say I don't know who he was, or I'd put him over. Was calling guys like by girls' names. He was terrible. He didn't know what time it was, and so at the end of the night, I went to the promoter, a guy named Joe Pedicino, and I said, I don't know what you're paying this stiff, but I'll do it for nothing if you'll let me join the bunch. And Joe said, nothing? You're hired. And the next week, I started doing ring announcing for the local Georgia independent shows, and I had watched those shows on Atlanta television. And when I did a couple of shows, he said, "You've done this before." I said, "I've never done ring announcing, but I've been a disc jockey for, at that point, about 9 years, and my sports background." He said, "How do you want to try television?" I said, "Why not? Sure, let's go." And And he put me on television one week, and the rest was history. The next, seemingly like 3 months later, he said, "I'm going to go to the Global Wrestling Federation. We're going to start the show on ESPN. You ever been on ESPN?" I said, "Are you kidding me? Never. I've only watched it a couple of times. Let's go." And then off we went from there.
So even before that happened, before even you even got started in broadcasting, did you have an idea that you were going to be a commentator? Like in the future, I'm talking about when you were a kid. Were you focused on becoming a wrestler?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'm 6'1". When I played high school and college football, I was like 280. I was a big guy. Worked out, strong. Benching 300 plus, and I'm going to be a wrestler. I'm going to be hasty. And I was a little kid. If you go back and somewhere there's one of those after mags where this is so far before you guys' time, but when the Inside Wrestling and The Wrestler and Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines back in the 70s used to have these like 2-page spreads where any mark could send in their school picture, and they would put the picture in the magazine. It had God knows, probably 24 per 2-page spread every issue, and you could put who you were, your home address, which, oh my God, now you can't do that. But mine was on there when I lived down in Thomaston, Georgia, and I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be a good guy, and my favorite wrestler was Haystacks Calhoun. And
wow.
This was like 1972, and Haystacks Calhoun was like 601 pounds from Morgan's Corner, Kentucky, and I'm in my hometown eating cheese sandwiches on white bread and everything else, trying to gain up to 601 pounds, as an 8-year-old. But I didn't make it, thank God. But I got close, playing football and everything. But that's what I wanted to be. Was a wrestler more than an announcer. And when I got to be a for real announcer for high school and college athletics, then I realized it's not healthy trying to gain up to 600 pounds. How about I'll drop some weight and hit the gym a little bit and be an announcer.
Yeah. All right. And, while you were working your way through the independents, and what got you noticed by, unless it was maybe Eric Bischoff, or somebody else that was working for WCW, how did you get noticed by them?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is working in Atlanta, Georgia, and again, this goes back 25 years. When you were in wrestling, there was really no better way to get noticed than just to be in the business in Georgia, because even through the 70s and through the 80s, with Atlanta being the headquarters of Georgia Championship Wrestling, and for a while one half of the headquarters of Jim Crockett Promotions, there was still a healthy independent wrestling environment in North Georgia. And again, I went through the story with Joe about, offering to work for free. And I'll give you guys, the free advice that if you want to make it in the business, volunteer to work for free, and the business will beat a path to your door. And that's what I did. And when I was working for the Georgia group with WCW being headquartered right here in Atlanta, a lot of the guys would watch our North Georgia show. In Atlanta, we had Joe Pedicino had an 8-hour block from 6 at night until 2 o'clock in the morning on every Saturday night on Channel 69 in Atlanta. He would show, 6 hours of independent wrestling. Not necessarily independent, but he would show like an hour of WCW, an hour of the WWF at the time, and then the Puerto Rico show, the Memphis show, the North Georgia show, the Portland show. So in Atlanta, every Saturday night, if you were really into wrestling, you got every territory there was on one channel
Loved to have been growing up on
every Saturday. And the WCW guys would watch that block as they're sitting home unless they're working a house show somewhere, and they watched the show. And Steve Prazak, again, my second best friend in the world behind my wife, we would do everything we could, since we were working for like $5 a month. That's literally what we got paid. So we figured, like, what are they going to do? Fire us for $5 a month? They're going to find somebody better than us. So we would do everything we could to crack each other up. And fortunately, our sense of humor was the same sense of humor that Eric and Paige, Diamond Dallas Page, and the late great Chris Kanyon and Disco Inferno and Brian Clark, who was Wrath for a while, and Adam Bomb. Those guys that lived here, they loved it because they loved our sense of humor. So when they would watch the show, they kept it in the back of their head, these guys are funny as hell. They're putting on crap wrestling on Saturday night and making it interesting. So that's how we parlayed that into both of us making it to WCW and ECW respectively.
Nice. Wow. Okay. And you definitely got a chance to work, obviously, Monday Nitro with Tony Schiavone, and even got the chance to work with one of my all-time favorites. Such a colorful guy. I don't know what it was like working with him in WCW, but Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like working with Bobby?
Bobby was, I'll tell you that I tell this story about Bobby, and I know Bobby's health of late has been really sad and tragic as he's entering his latter years. But and I say this with all love and respect for Bobby Heenan. But if you watch the show, if you watch Nitro, Worldwide, Thunder, any of the shows we did on WCW back, in the late 90s up until the bitter end, it would seem this way. If you watch the shows, here's what I think you would take away from that, is Bobby Heenan is the guy you want over at your house watching the pay-per-views on the big screen television and, eating your chips and nachos and drinking your beer. That's how he came across. And that Larry Zbyszko was this ornery, asshole of a guy, and you're like, oh, my God, when is he leaving? Can we find some way to get him out of the house so we can enjoy the rest of the show? Well, the truth was, it was the exact opposite. Bobby was really a bitter guy. I think he was unhappy with how the business had treated him by the time he got to WCW. He wasn't unpleasant to me at all. He was a joy to work with. He was professional and helped me a ton. And if you go on YouTube and search for Bobby and I, you'll find a million videos, and we seem like we're having a good time, and we were. But behind the scenes, he was really not. He didn't seem like he was having a good time. Where, on the other hand, Legend, was just a stitch. And if you ever see video of Larry Zbyszko and I, that is probably the only time I'm not cracking up, is when the red light was on, because the guy was just the funniest guy in the world and to work with. So it's almost opposite, that even though Legend seemed like he was a bitter old guy who, really wanted to be anywhere except on television, and Bobby was the life of the party, they were the exact opposite when the red light was off.
Now, we talk about Bobby Heenan. I mean, you had to be watching him, as a child, or at least as a teenager, before he went to WCW, like as a manager. Was it kind of like surreal to actually be working with him at the time when you did?
Oh, let me tell you the story. When if I may, when
Go ahead.
in let's see, this is December 1995. I was I have a real job. I have, long story short, I've worked my ass off to become whatever I am at my career. I went to college for 1,000 years and got, a good many degrees and all that. So I'm at my real job, and in December 1995, we're at a restaurant in Atlanta. Oh, what was it called? It was called the Abbey. It was like an old 1800s church, one of the few buildings in Atlanta that survived the Civil War. After they burned everything down, they left the one church standing. So this building is now a restaurant, or it was then at the time in Atlanta, called the Abbey. We're having our Christmas luncheon and awards thing. Anyway, long story short, was I was given Employee of the Year for that year, that my real job. And so I'm like, terrific, yay, and then Scott Hudson, great, and they brought me up, my photo taken, and, whatever, got this plaque and all this other stuff, and it was very much appreciated. And they say, okay, great, Scott, go sit down. So I go back to my table with my coworkers, and as I sit down, the waiter comes up and says, are you Mr. Hudson? I said, yes. And he said, we have a phone call for you at the front desk. I said, okay, cool. I was like, what is it, the president calling? What's going to happen next? And I go up to the thing there at the front, the maitre d' stand, and all I hear, I said, hello, and I heard, yo, Scooter, this is DDP. And it was Paige.
Perfect.
And he said, I said, hey, Paige, what's going on? And I'd known him from watching the Georgia show. We'd gotten to be, sort of acquaintances, as it were. And he goes, got somebody who wants to talk to you. And it was Eric. He said, Scott, this is Eric Bischoff. Eric, how, wonderful to talk to you. What's going on? He said, we've got an opening for an announcer. I've watched your stuff. I think you would fit in terrific. Can you come down for an audition tomorrow? I said, sure, why not? I'll be there. And I knew where the studios were down at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Anyway, to cut to the chase, you ask about Bobby. I go to the studios at CNN Center in Atlanta. If anybody's ever been to Atlanta and taken the tour, it's right at the base of where that 7,000-foot escalator is in CNN Center in Atlanta. And I keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and there's no receptionist. And Keith Mitchell, God love him, one of the greatest guys ever in WCW, a director and producer, sticks his head out and said, I never met him. He goes, are you Scott? I said, I am. He said, we'll be with you in 1 second. I said, terrific. Well, about 10 minutes later, I'm still sitting there. I've been there about 30 minutes now, and the door opens again, and Keith sticks his head out. He goes, Scott, we're ready for you. Come on in. So I walk through that door and stand immediately next to Bobby Heenan, one of my childhood heroes, on the set of WCW Pro Wrestling, the set where you would do your wraparound, your stand-ups. And all Keith says is, Scott, and I introduced myself. He introduced me to Bobby, and I said, Bobby, I'm Scott Hudson. And he goes, hey, great to meet you. I'm Bobby Heenan. I said, I'm Scott Hudson. I'm a longtime fan. He goes, all right, let's knock this out. First time I met him, and in that instant, Keith says, all right, Scott, you and Bobby are doing the stand-up intro to Pro. You're going to toss it to Tony and Mike Tenay, who's at ringside. The match is, pick two guys, who knows, Sting and, Hugh Morris, whoever it was. It wouldn't have been those two guys back in 95, but regardless, it was, pitched to those two guys in the ring, billboard these matches, 1, 2, 3, 4. You got it? I said, absolutely. He goes, here we go, in 3, 2, and that was it. And I had literally that much time to meet Bobby, get my head together, and do an intro for a WCW television program, and I nailed it in one take. And when I was told many times after that interview, it wasn't so much that it was perfect, but that I came in, wasn't awestruck, wasn't anything other than professional. When they said, do this, do this, do this, in 3, 2, and I did it, but that was it. They knew I could work under pressure. So that was the first time I met Bobby, was I literally had 10 seconds to meet a guy I'd watched from when I was a little kid, and then to doing television with him, and did it without a mistake. And that meant a lot to them, and it got me hired.
There is no way, no chance in hell, that if I would have met Bobby Heenan, I would have to kiss his feet. I could not have gotten that job as a commentator for WCW at all. That was, I don't know how you do it. You must have.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. Before that, if somebody had said that was going to happen, that's the reaction I would have had. But when you're in that position and had been doing it for as long as I had and knew what was coming up and had the experience I had, it's amazing how much your instincts kick in and your, oh my God, how did I just do that, leaves you. And you'd probably surprise yourself at how well you would do.
Now, actually going into the Monday Night Wars, during, I mean, actually, like when commentating, how was that? I mean, like when you're competing against a rival company, did you kind of lose interest? Not necessarily lose interest in the job, but did it get kind of not fun at times because you have to be you kind of be perfect on almost because you're rivaling a company?
Oh man, what a great question. And the reason why is that's what would seem to be common sense, but that never happened. I can tell you that as we would do Nitro, and we prepared, I don't know, God, hours and hours and hours we prepared before the 1, 2, or 3 hour broadcast, depending on when we were on. All we were concerned about, and by we I mean Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay, Gene Okerlund, Bobby Heenan, Larry Zbyszko, Dave Penzer, anybody that was holding the mic for any reason, Mark Madden, all we were concerned about was doing the best show we could. We weren't interested in are we being better than the WWF. And if you wrap yourself around being better than your competition, you're going to lose every time. The best thing you can do is to be the best product you can be and let everything else fall where they may. So I can't tell you that we spent all of our time watching ratings or watching quarter-hour breakdowns. Tuesday morning, yeah, we did. Absolutely we did. We weren't blind. But when the show was on and when we're getting ready on that Monday, we weren't worried about what they were going to do and, when was Stone Cold going to be on and when was Val Venus going to be on, and we would have to counter-program that with something better. And no, that wasn't it. It was what can we do to be the absolute best show on Monday night, not the best wrestling show, but the best show. And that's how we approached every Nitro. And
that must have been kind of like WWE's downfall for a bit, because you guys were beating them in the ratings for quite some time before they...
Well, that was the NWO storyline, I would think, right?
Yep.
Sure. And that's a testament to one man, and that's Eric Bischoff. And Eric gets an awful lot of blame for what ended up happening to WCW. And I will tell you, and I'll say this now that it's been, 14 years almost after after I started on Nitro, and 13 years after Nitro, collapsed there in Panama City Beach. It was not the fault of Eric Bischoff, the creative mind. In all honesty, it may have been Eric's fault as a business manager, but as far as a creative mind, Eric was the only reason we stayed in business as long as we did. I would follow Eric or Vince Russo into battle anytime they wanted to lead an army, to this day, to March of 2014, if they called and said, we're going to battle again, are you with us? My answer is absolutely. Where do I get my helmet? Let's go.
I actually do have a question for you, and I think you get asked this question quite a bit. Unless I missed it because I stepped away for a minute. Calling the action on the night of the infamous, what did you say, when Hogan came out and Jeff Jarrett laid down for him, Bash at the Beach in 2000? Right. What was that night like? I mean, did you guys see any of that coming? I mean, what was the describe that night to us if you can.
Okay. Well, great question. I don't mind talking about that. It's been a long time, guys, for almost 14 years. But I can tell you that that's one of the things Tony Schiavone taught me was, it's a work. We've got a 40-page script that's got all kind of places where we have to say, tonight's replay brought to you by Skittles. Taste the rainbow. We got all that stuff laid out in front of us. And if we want, we can know everything that's going to happen in the show. Not so much how the match is going to go, but who's going over and and what the finish is and what the angles are leading to. Well, Tony told me early on, and he was exactly right. He was right about everything, incidentally. But it's great to know that you're not surprised when somebody wins the title. That's fine. But everything else, don't do the best you can to be surprised when it happens. The true sign of a real announcer when it comes to wrestling or football or basketball or baseball or anything is the raw passion of the moment. And in those other sports, nobody knows who's going to win the Super Bowl until the finish, except for this year when it was obvious the Seahawks were kicking the Broncos' ass from the first play. But usually you don't know who's going to win. But for wrestling, people know from 10 o'clock in the morning when we're doing pre-tapes and production meetings. So the only way we could get away with that is to not read the finishes, not know who was going over. So what happened that night at Bash at the Beach 2000, we knew that at the end of the night, Hulk Hogan was going to have the title because of in the business they called, I don't know if they still do, but a schmoz finish. There was not going to be a 1, 2, 3 in the ring, the normal way we see a match progress, the hills and valleys, our peak and valleys and everything, and then a 1, 2, 3. We knew that the end of the night was going to end the way it was. We didn't know how they were going to get there, and we most certainly didn't know Vince Russo was going to come out and cut that promo. We didn't know any of that stuff. And when that happened, what you heard from Mark Madden, Tony Schiavone, and I was legit. When we're sitting there going, well, this wasn't on the format, that's a shoot, because it wasn't. And I think that adds a lot to it, because even though at the end of the day, it was a work, we weren't in on it, and we called it like it was a shoot, and that made it seem all the more real.
Wow. I mean, that's such a talked about, night. Even all these years later, I think Vince Russo gets asked that question. I think he must have been asked at least hundreds of times
sure.
about that particular night because, it was so controversial, at least at that point in time.
And I can tell you, I haven't talked to Vince probably in 6 years. Haven't had a conversation with him. I wish, if by chance he's listening to this broadcast, give me a call. I would love to, take him out for dinner, just to, hook up and revisit old times. But I can tell you that Vince's performance that night was awesome. So was Hulk's. So was Jeff, who I just hold in the highest regard. So was Booker. Everybody's performance that night was off the charts because, and for one reason above all others, is that here we are in 2014 and people are still talking about it.
Absolutely.
I mean, who the hell is talking about the Royal Rumble from 2008? Nobody. So people are still talking Bash at the Beach 2000, almost 14 years after it happened.
Yeah. And then another night in particular that they still talk about that they wished probably would have gone a different route had it been possible for Bischoff to purchase WCW like he was planning to, or at least that's what he had said. And it actually got bought out by the McMahons. The last Nitro, what was that night like for you personally? I mean, you get to call the last Nitro ever really in WCW with Tony, and describe that night to you, how the atmosphere was like for you guys then.
Well, first let me start with this. I grew up, and I said this before, in the deepest, darkest redneck corner of South Georgia. So Panama City Beach was where we went every weekend. So being in Panama City Beach to me, as gorgeous as it is, the white sand beaches of the Florida Gulf Coast, that's where I grew up. So being there was like being home for me. It wasn't like being, no offense to the good people in Seattle or Vancouver or Frisco or San Diego, that was almost my home territory because it was a 3-hour drive from my parents' house. So I was very comfortable there. And when we got there, that Monday night, we knew that we hadn't been given travel information for the following Monday or any Mondays after that. Usually they gave us at least a month's worth of travel info. A month from this Monday you're going to be in San Diego. A month from next Monday you're in, Dallas. A month from next Monday you're in Memphis. So we knew where we were going, obviously. But we knew that was the last Monday for which we had been given travel. So we figured something's up. We had heard all the stories of Eric trying to put together Fusion Media to buy the company and do all of that. And Monday night or Thursday before that Monday night, my dates are off. So when the 23rd, 22nd, whatever that was, we got the word that the WWE had bought what was left of the company, and we had two people, Jamie Kellner and Brad Siegel, two people that, should just be taken out and flogged, honestly, had become in charge of WCW and everything that ran WCW as part of the Turner hierarchy. And in their infinite wisdom, well, let me rephrase that, in their finite wisdom, had decided that the first thing to do would be to cancel all WCW television programming. And somehow they thought this was a good idea. These guys are complete and total idiots. They don't know, whether to scratch their ass or wind their watch, but here they are running, WCW and a good bit of Turner Sports. So, and I think now one of them, I think Brad Siegel, is completely out of television, and Jamie Kellner now runs like a gospel music channel or something. So wow. They're basically out of television. But screw them and the horse they rode in on. But regardless, when they came in and decided to cancel the WCW television, well, that took our value down from whatever it was to basically less than nothing. Because without television, we couldn't pump our pay-per-view product. We couldn't sell our advertisers. We couldn't sell our syndicated product. We were basically just an independent wrestling program, and without television. And hell, that put us below, Memphis and Florida and Alabama and everybody else that was an independent promotion that had television. So we were at the bottom of the wrestling food chain because of these two goofballs. And so we get to Panama City Beach to do the last show, knowing that it's the last show. And it's bittersweet. We flew down there to Panama City Beach, which from Atlanta is like an hour flight or less. And we camped out there next door to Club La Vila. They put us up in a nice hotel right next door to La Vila. And we did the show. And we only did half the show, Tony and I, because Vince was taking over the second half of the show. It was a simulcast with Raw for the second half of the show. Shane McMahon, who is a terrific guy and should be running that company instead of Stephanie, in all honesty, along with Bruce Pritchard and a good many other folks, were down there in Panama City Beach, and they worked the angle about the buyout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Tony and I did the best we could with what we had. We got to announce Sting and Flair as the last match on Nitro, which was incredible. The two guys that had been there from the very beginning, and they did a great job. And I do remember when we finished the show, which again was halfway through the show. The rest of the show was a simulcast. Yeah. We're backstage, which is basically being in the convention center part of the hotel we're in, next door to La Vila. It was all tears and all hugs, and I'll never forget you. It was great to work with you. Thanks for everything, from the ring crew, from the sound guys, the camera guys, the lighting guys. From Kid Romeo to Billy Kidman to Ray Jr. all the way up to Ric Flair and Sting. It was just these group hugs, and because we knew it was the last night, that it would never be again. And that was tough. And when that was over, Tony came up to me, Tony Schiavone, and said, "What time's your flight?" I said, "I don't know, like 5 o'clock in the morning." He said, "I'll tell you what, jump in my car, we'll drive back to Atlanta." So Tony and I jumped in his rental car about 11 o'clock that Monday night and made the 4.5-hour drive back to Atlanta. And if you can imagine, for a mark like me, to share a car ride with Tony Schiavone for 4.5, 5 hours from the beach back to Atlanta, just reminiscing and, giving voice to everything that we had experienced in WCW, me for 6 years and Tony for 20 years, that was a memory that I will never forget. And he has so much more talent and ability and and memories of the business that I do. So I just sat and listened and just laughed and reminisced and appreciated how much I love the sport and the business and the guys in it and the girls in it. And then, he dropped me off at my house, and I went back to work, and he started a new phase in his life, and that was it.
And, was it hard for you to leave the wrestling business?
It was difficult, but I thought at that point I was done. I had at that point put in about 15 years in, and then WWE came calling, and I went and did the horrible 2 weeks of the invasion angles, that are my only regrets that I've ever had in this business. And then, a year later, TNA came calling, and I worked for TNA for 3 years after that, and actually had a blast working for TNA. They were incredibly fun and nice and professional. And then, when they moved to Orlando, I just couldn't follow them down there. But when TNA ended, which would have been in January 2005, 9 years ago, that was the last thing I ever did. So I didn't leave the business when WCW went under, but it was pretty close. Everything I did after that was on a much lower level, but still, WCW was my home. That's where I had my greatest success and, the most fun and everything else. So I miss it and those guys like you wouldn't believe.
And I think Mike Tenay actually said this. I was hearing it from, I think it was a documentary they did with TNA, that TNA was basically the search for the lost WCW fan. Because once WCW ended, it's like two different audiences went from, there's some that stay with WWE and watched them, but then some were kind of like lost and went to TNA. Well, the search was like for TNA. Like that's what they're seeing TNA as a search for the long lost WCW fans.
That's a great point, and he's assuming he said that, he's exactly right. Think about this, guys. When we had our run, when the Monday Night Wars, just from a strictly business standpoint, we kicked their ass like crazy for a while, and then they beat us into the ground and then beat us out of business after a while. But during that war, on the best Monday night, we had 10 million viewers. If you add Raw and Nitro together, some nights we had 7, they had 3. It probably ended up at the end that they had 7 and we had 3. But regardless, we had about 10 million viewers between the two shows. And when we went under, when they bought out ECW and they bought us out and everything went away, they didn't keep 10 million viewers. Now here in 2014, they're doing good to break 4 million viewers. I mean, those people didn't die. I mean, there hasn't been some mass, epidemic that killed off 6 million people. Those people are still out there. They just don't want to watch that product. And that's where the WWE has missed the boat, in my opinion, is that target market, that audience is still there. They're going to have their excuses of, well, the internet, and there's now 500 channels, and there's streaming, and there's this. And, well, sure there are, but there are still shows that draw 10 million people like there were back then. And they've lost those viewers, and in all honesty, it's because they have zero desire to expand beyond their base. They are doing everything they can to keep the 4 million people they have, and on their best day in their best corporate meetings, they're thinking like maybe next month we can hit 4.2 million instead of what the hell happened to the 10 million people that were watching this stuff in 1999 and 2000? Where are they? But they're not going for it.
Well, let me ask you now, Scott. There has been speculation as far as Jeff Jarrett, since he's departed TNA, that he is possibly, everybody's going to speculate that he may be starting up a new promotion. Now, if he were to call you tomorrow and say, you know what, Scott, I'm doing this, and I want you to be my main guy, my play-by-play guy, do commentating for my show, my new wrestling company, would you do it?
Yes. Straight away, yes. Which tells you right there he hasn't called. I'm an old man now. I mean, I'm I'll be
but you're
50
still good
years
at what
old
you
in
do.
December. But I think it's not because I want to get back in it. I really don't. I am completely happy being a public servant and being a husband to my darling, dear, patient wife and a dad to my daughter. And, so I don't think he's going to call. But
the reason I ask is I know because if you look at Jim Ross, he's
Jeff,
over 60.
I would do it in a heartbeat.
Well, the reason I ask is because if you think of guys like yourself, like even Tony, who's left the business in this point, he's been doing, I believe, baseball, and just recently Jim Ross has left and doing other things as well. I mean, you guys are older now, but you guys were good at what you did. I mean, hell, you were great at what you did. And you brought passion into wrestling. You made it entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only reason why I say that, because I think at this point there's not very many great commentators out there. And this is nothing against Michael Cole. He works hard at what he does, and he's not always great, but he has his good days and he has his bad days.
He has way more bad days than good days. I think he sucks, honestly. But regardless, this is 2014. There are other people willing to go out and put in the time and the travel and the effort, and more power to them. Apart from the fact that there aren't as many independent promotions to learn the skill of professional wrestling in the ring, there are, by a factor of 10, that fewer promotions that have television and people that can come in and broadcast the show. And to the WWE's detriment, they think if you're good looking, if you've got hair, 2 strikes that are against me right out of the blocks, and that you can call wrestling. You can't. Now, if you can call football, you can call baseball, you can call wrestling. You can't. And they don't understand that it's a work, that it's not a real sport where the best team wins. It's a work. It's a soap opera. It's scripted reality television, and there aren't many people out there plying their trade. Now, to their credit, what they've got going on in NXT and with the Florida Championship show, they're doing the best they can to bring in people and teach them broadcasting. But the thing is, what they're doing is teaching people how to be on live television and how to do broadcasting, and they're realizing, hey, this is really good. I'm really good at this. I'm going to go do a legit sport on a legit channel, not stay with the WWE, and they're leaving. And that's sad, but the WWE isn't to be faulted. That really is to their credit that they're doing such a good job of building announcers for other sports and other networks. What there needs to be is an independent television system out there somewhere where they can go pluck the talents like they did with Tony and me and Tanae and, God, pick a name out of thin air that they...
Even Eric Bischoff. I mean, he was great at commentating, too.
Exactly right. And Eric and Jim Ross and Lance Russell and Gordon Soley. Yeah. Those people didn't start at the top. They started in regional promotions, an avenue that just doesn't exist anymore.
Very true.
And I think it takes...
Gobbled up by WWE. So go ahead, Austin.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
I was saying I think it takes a lot, to make a company actually work and kind of roll in the train tracks, and from the referees to the sound guys, the camera guys, the commentators, most of all, it takes a whole entire show to be successful. And you were excellent at what you did, and I still think you have a ton to offer if you ever had the chance to actually go back and start do commentating.
Well, if you want to do
you're really good. I love it. I love your work. It's phenomenal. And how is it going back on and seeing today how they came out with the WCW Nitro Volume 1 and 2 DVDs they have out now, that you're on most of the matches.
Sure. Well, it's fun to watch. That's the one thing the WWE I don't think is considering, and I can't imagine that some, as smart as they are, and I've known Hunter for a long time. I've only met Vince a couple of times, but Hunter I've known, and the guys that run the company, Kevin Dunn and everybody else, I can't imagine this hasn't crossed their mind that when they do stuff like the best of Nitro, the best of WCW, the rise and fall of WCW Nitro, when they do the network, what they're doing is exposing how much better the product was before now. And what I get what they're trying to do is make money. You know, God bless America. The bottom line is what's on the bottom line. And that's great. And if they're making money, more power to them. But what they're doing to their audience is showing them, hey, remember how great things used to be in 2003? Well, you thought that was good? How about 1999? You thought that was good? How about 1995? Wait a minute. How about 1984? How much better things were then than now? And if they think that's going to keep people watching the current product by showing how much better it used to be, I mean, you don't see the NFL putting out DVDs of, you know, the old leather helmet days. You know, you don't see that. It's because the current product is so good that people are like, oh, my God, that was terrible. It's so much better now. And the WWE is doing the exact opposite. People watching it are like, well, other than Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, who's no longer there, this really isn't that interesting of a product. But, geez, was it good 6 years ago? My God, was it good 14 years ago? Geez, 20 years ago, this was a great thing to watch. And that's going to kill the product from the ground up. And I don't think they're thinking that far in advance. They're just seeing, you know, network subscriber dollars right now and not thinking, you know, for a 5-year, 10-year strategic planning aspect.
That's a great point. That's actually a really great insight on that, and it makes complete sense.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask you, though, if you know, fans were wanting to keep up with what you're doing lately, how you're doing, even just say, hey Scott, how you doing? You know, what you been up to? Is there do you do any of the other social media? I know you have a Facebook, but I mean, do you keep in contact? Do you add your fans? Do you have your website? Do you have anything to do with any of that?
Well, I have a Facebook page, which is, you know, mostly me posting stuff about my wife's art and my daughter and, you know, the foolishness she falls into, and every now and then I'll post something about wrestling. But, you know, I don't know how old you guys are, but when you get to be 40 years old, which was like the pinnacle for me, like I'm 40, gosh, you know, I really need to hang this up. I'm too old for this stuff. You realize that there are people younger than you that really want to make the sacrifice of their family and their time to keep the sport and the business going. I mean, I'm on Facebook. Send me a friend request. Great, fantastic, perfect. I'll accept blindly, you know, anybody that shows up. But there's not a whole lot of wrestling there. Except I do enjoy the friends I've made on Facebook. A lot of them are wrestling people, and they'll post wrestling stuff. So that's basically how I keep up with the sport and the business now. I actually today when I got home from work, I watched Raw from last night. So that's about it. I'll watch Impact on Saturday afternoon, and then Raw on Tuesday afternoon, and then the pay-per-views when I feel like it. But Facebook is the only place I am anymore. I'm just an old man, guys. I'm an old man that likes to tell stories about, you know, the war, the Monday Night War,
to be honest,
War.
To be honest, Scott, I mean, I'm going to be 36 years old here, and Austin, he's, I believe, how old are you, Austin?
I'm turning 17 in April, but I promise you I know way more than it seems. I get that. I'm not kidding.
Age is just a number, Scott.
Age is just a number when it comes to wrestling with me, but I don't know anything about math. You can ask me about math. I won't know a thing about anything in school, but wrestling, that's another story.
Actually, you know, what I was going to ask you, too, Scott, is although Austin wants to pursue a career in professional wrestling, I myself have seen myself in the commentating role. And learning from guys like yourself, like Jim Ross, like Tony, like Gordon, would be something I you know, it's great advice. I can definitely pick your brain, and you know, that's another reason why I wanted to bring you on, because not only did we all watch you on television all those years back, you know, you still have, you know, you have some great stories that people who may not have, you're like, oh wow, Scott Hudson, wonder what he's up to. We're going to take a listen and hear some great stories, and that's another reason that brought you on, because you have some great stories, and you clear up a lot of the what people might have thought of Eric Bischoff, because he gets dealt a very harsh card, and people really thought he was a real prick to work for. I don't know that, and that's why I asked that question.
He
you actually cleared it up before I even asked you. You know what I mean?
He was terrific to work for.
And,
well,
and
I'll
then,
tell you this, guys, and at the end of the day, wrestling for me was, I won't say a hobby, because I did well at it. I worked hard. I worked really, really hard. I invested a lot of time. I flew literally 1,000,000 miles in the air and went to every corner of the country, and I don't know how many different countries and all that. And I'm not complaining at all. I had a blast. But at the end of the day, I went to college. I did time in graduate school, and I have a career outside of wrestling. And I would highly, highly recommend that if anybody wants to be in this business, especially here in 2014, get an education, have something to fall back on, get your, get a teaching certificate, go to law school, pass the bar, get an accounting degree, get certified as an accountant, whatever you want to do something like that, and do wrestling as a side, and that's how you'll find bliss. If I had ever decided to do wrestling as a full-time pursuit, number one, if I was any good at it, I would have been 1,000 times worse, because the pressure would have gotten to me. And number two, I would have never been any good at it, because the pressure would have gotten to me. There was never a day that I showed up at a wrestling show that I wasn't a mark. To this day, I don't know when this is going to air, but March 18th, 2014, I'm still a mark. I've never met Austin Idol, and one day I hope to, because he was my guy growing up. I've met everybody else under the sun. Fez and Carl Gotch and, everybody down to Kid Romeo. I've met everybody and worked with them, but I've never met Austin Idol. And one day I want to, and that drives me. It's like I drove to Memphis to watch him at a Legends show one night, and he no-showed. So, damn it, that was a 7-hour drive. But so that part of me is still there. And if that ever goes away, then I'll know that I'll say no to any interview request that comes through my Facebook account or whatever. But as long as I've got something in me burning that just shaking Austin Idol's hand would make my week, then I'll keep doing whatever I can do to further along this business and tell the stories and let everybody know that this is, the greatest business and the greatest sport ever, as Harley Race used to say, on God's green earth. I believe that.
My last question for you is actually about the Hall of Famers that are going into this year's class. What are your thoughts on Warrior, Jake, Lita, Paul Bearer, Mr. T, and I believe Carlos Colon? Any thoughts on them going into the Hall?
Yeah, those are all great. They do a terrific job with the Hall of Fame. I think the next big shoe to drop there will be an actual physical Hall of Fame somewhere. They'll build it. But until then, and in spite of that, there is the Amateur and Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Newton, Iowa. I would highly recommend anyone that wants to make a pilgrimage to honor the history of this business and this sport. That's where you go. No offense to the WWE, but they don't have a Hall of Fame to visit yet. I've had the fortune of being out to Iowa a couple of times to visit the Amateur and Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. That was an amazing place, and I'll be honest with you, I've got in my garage, let's see, every Wrestling Observer newsletter from 1984 to, 2002. I've got magazines and yearbooks and everything else, and my wife is consistent, like, when are we going to get rid of this crap? I'm like, well, I'm going to throw it away. One weekend I'm just going to load it all up in my Jeep and drive to Iowa and say, look, here's who I am. Do a Google search. You'll see my pedigree. Will you take this stuff from me? And they'll probably say yes, and I'll get rid of it that way. So until the WWE builds their Hall of Fame, the one in Newton, Iowa is the one that I hold up in the highest regard.
And, coincidentally, next week we're actually bringing on Sonny Ono. Not sure if you remember him.
Absolutely. Love Sonny. He's first off, you will laugh basically nonstop from the minute he calls in until the minute you end the interview. He is a funny as hell guy. His kid is a hell of an athlete too, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
So you'll hear about that. And Sonny's a terrific guy. I won't spoil any of his stories, but I love Sonny. Miss him a great deal. It's been a while since I've talked to him, but he was there with us in WCW back in the late '90s. I
will definitely tell him we how much fun we had tonight talking to you. Austin, did you have any final questions for Mr. Hudson?
I just want to say, congratulations on all your success, because, really, if you think about it, not many people at all go out and really accomplish their dreams, and I think it's important to actually, live a life that you do something remarkable in it, because I think people focus too much on getting money and, earning money and trying to have the most money when you have a legacy now that people remember, forever.
Yeah, that's
true. Unfortunately, the first legacy that I have is that show where I did Nitro without a shirt on. And I've dropped 60 pounds since then, so I'm not nearly that out of shape anymore. But regardless, as long as people get a laugh or entertained or can say, "What the hell happened? Why did you do a show without your shirt on?" That's perfect. That makes me a hit at parties, and that's what it's all about. And I've got a wonderful wife and a wonderful daughter, and a terrific job, and a great life, and a big nice house, and a condo with the beach, and everything else. So it's terrific to me. I've been very, very lucky.
You've definitely led a great life, and for you to sit down and talk with us, for almost an hour now, we can't thank you enough for all the stories and the wisdom you've shared, and just the memories that you took us back on.
Yeah.
And for that, we are eternally grateful, Mr. Hudson. We want to thank you for taking time with us tonight, and we wish you the very best and continued success in whatever you wish to be doing in the next few years of your life, the rest of your life, or whatever that case. It was indeed a pleasure, sir.
Well, Felix, Austin, I appreciate you having me on the show. It was a great pleasure, and anytime I get to do this, it reminds me of how much I love the business, and that always puts a smile on my face. Good luck to you, and thanks for having me on.
All right, no problem. You have a good night, sir.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. My goodness, Austin, I'm at a loss for words.
Felix.
What an enjoyable ride that was.
He
is
one of my new favorite people.
And he took us, you literally felt like you were there seeing it as he told it. Meeting Bobby, and I can understand. I mean, when you, I think I lost you at that point when he was telling a story about Bobby and the difference between working with Bobby and Larry, or you might have heard it, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but he was saying how Bobby was really bitter and not happy during his time in WCW, and it was noticeable. But, it was what it was.
Bobby
and he means it with all due respect, because, Bobby, getting in there, he wasn't happy. It just, because it was just, well, whatever. We'll leave it for what it was.
And even though
Scott go on and talk about his amazing career, going in from the independents and getting noticed, and his recommendation, or not recommendation, but he got a call from DDP and Eric. And the whole spiel was awesome, I thought.
And even though, like what you were saying about Bobby, he came in and he did his job regardless of where he didn't like to be there or not. The same with Bret Hart. He didn't want to be at WCW. He was a WWE guy at heart, but for reasons that we already know of, he had to go there, and he didn't want to be there at all. But they still went there and did their job, nonetheless. And this guy, I can definitely say that he's a blackjack. Definitely would describe as a blackjack on Pipebomb Radio, a guy that you can listen to for hours. You don't really have to say much, but when you do, it gets longer. So he's definitely one of those blackjacks.
For him to take the time to sit here and just kind of reminisce for an hour, just talk some wrestling, just sitting here talking with, we're all three wrestling fans. I mean, he's an old school fan, and I can respect that. I think we're both old school fans. I like to think we are. Overall, though, it was definitely a very fun experience, and I'm glad he accepted my offer to come on and talk with us, and I had a great time. And thank you for standing in, because I had to step away a couple times, and I think I covered you when I lost you at least once, I think. I'm not sure. Well, anyway, you were still listening either way, so Overall, how would you rate tonight's show?
Absolute 10. I want him back every single day of the week.
Yes, and let's talk about next week. As we did mention, next week we have a double feature. We have a guest returning.
Oh my
and
God!
As I mentioned, of course. Go ahead.
And I'm saying he like Scott mentioned how much fun we're gonna have with Sonny Ono. How funny these guys.
I'm looking forward to it.
This is gonna be a really funny 2 hours with Jack Jameson also going to be on with us next week.
Yeah.
I mean, Manarchy. And then you have the guy, Sonny Ono, who obviously, yes, has a lot of funny stories from what Scott's been saying. So, I mean, I guess you can tell.
Well, he was a wrestling manager.
Comedy Hour.
He was a commentator. He worked with a lot of guys in Japan. I mean, he was a part of wrestling for a long time, not just in WCW. And now his son is an amateur wrestling, champion and doing quite well for himself, actually. I follow both Sonny and Scott on Facebook, and they're really great people to talk to follow, and they kind of post some crazy stuff, and it just I just read it and get a good laugh out of it sometimes, and I can see definitely with Sonny how proud he is of his son, and rightfully so, But next week, yes, Sonny Ono and Jack Jameson returns for part 2.
I cannot wait, because remember last time we left off with where we were talking. Well, we had a lot of talk about Jack Jameson's pets. You have Aja Kong, Two Pig, Piggy Smalls, and Misawa, and his two cats and 2 pigs. But what I wanted to talk about, what will we starting the interview with? No matter what in hell, we're starting with Lance Storm's Wrestling Academy, because I was so down to the point where we didn't get to talk about that, because I have a lot of. I think we can talk about an hour just on Lance Storm's. No, I'm just kidding. I just have a lot of questions for him with Lance Storm's Wrestling Academy, because training with Lance Storm, that's definitely an up on other guys who train with, people that might not be the standard of a Lance Storm. Look at the guys he's produced. Emma, who's a WWE main roster now. Let's see, Tyler Breeze on NXT, who's going to be in the main roster anytime soon. He has it all. Just the number of guys. Lance Storm's great.
I could tell that. You keep talking about him.
Lance Storm, my God. He's really...
Anyways, we will continue on the Last Ride tour of Saturday Night Slam.
Oh, another
continuing thing. This Saturday night.
We also have, actually, Sunday night, we have a new episode of PWHS, Pro Wrestling Historical Society, with Greg Skelly and Jimmy Wheeler. That was, the last... They're going to be... I had a lot of questions about why isn't there a new show every single week. They're actually spreading it out every other week, I think, or every other 2 weeks. They're going to have at least 2 episodes per month, because this is they talk about it for an hour, but it's really detailed information that that you can't just give away. You can't just give away every single week. It's really once people that listen to the show know what I'm talking about. You learn a lot if you listen.
Agreed.
This is a very people that want to learn about professional wrestling history. This is an excellent opportunity for a free opportunity. And I even told Felix this. I'm surprised they're not making us pay $100 per minute for them to talk, because they are really detailed what they say, because they're going way back and talking about history from professional wrestling and how we got here. What the steps were in order to get where we are right now.
Agreed. Well, I think that'll about do it. I honestly didn't think we would be on as long as we have been, and either way, I'm still happy. I'm a happy camper. Definitely look forward to the upcoming shows we got, and of course next week's show. All looks like it's supposed to go well. As far as what was to happen tomorrow, I don't know yet. We were planning something, and I can't really say anything just yet, because nothing's been for sure on that. If it happens, like I said, we will keep you guys informed, and I hope it does. If it does, cool. I think you guys will get a kick out of it. And if it doesn't, well, we'll move on, like we always do. But anything else you want to add, Austin?
Definitely. We have our Facebook pages and, everything. I'm going to start saying this. Everything that you need to follow us is on our website. On our website, we have our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and which I'm a big fan of Instagram now. I used to really dog on a lot in the past year, but now I'm really cool with it. We're good friends. But you can also check out Felix's Pinterest. You can check out all his vegetable garden pictures, his flowers. Anywhere from the plums to the violets. I mean, anything that you want.
Are you finished?
Wait, we finished talking about your garden? Not yet.
No, are you finished
apples,
jibber-jabbering about, rubbish that nobody needs to hear about?
Sure. I have to at least talk about it. I mean, it's really impressive.
I guess. But, well, I guess that'll do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Tune in to Saturday Night Slam this coming Saturday night, and, of course, Pro Wrestling Historical Society on Sunday.
Oh, yeah,
now,
brother.
On behalf of Austin, this is Felix saying keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Good night, everybody. Good night, Austin.
Good night.